The following is for informational purposes only. For medical advice, please see a medical professional.
Welcome to Staying Alive with Margaret and Susy. Susy mentioned to me recently, Margaret, Thanksgiving's coming up and I want to talk about food safety. And I know my friend Susy is an expert on this issue. And so that's what we're going to be covering today.
Yeah,
Susy,
thanks.
take it away.
I'm Susy, and we are staying alive. Yeah, this is a topic that I've had a lot of experience in and like to share with people around the holidays, especially, but it's important all year long. So, Margaret, have you ever had food poisoning?
Not that I know of.
Not that you know
Not
of.
that I know of, no.
Well, I know I've had it a couple of times, and sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of food poisoning cases go unreported. People sometimes think they have a stomach flu or, they think it's just something else, a little bug. So they don't report it. And so a lot of cases, I think, go unreported. So there are a lot of cases of food poisoning. And remember, when I say food poisoning, I'm talking about any kind of illness that you get from food or water. So in our country, water isn't as much of a concern as it is in some countries, right? The water that we drink and the water we cook with. But historically, it has been many years ago, of course. But nowadays, water isn't as big of an issue. It could be for other reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing is to realize that there are a lot of cases of foodborne illness. As many as 128,000 people get hospitalized every year, which is a lot, and some people die. So it's important to know that there are certain groups of people that are more vulnerable to food poisoning. We all know babies, of course. Seniors. Yes, seniors are definitely. So basically it's based on your immune system. So as you get older, your immune system is not as strong as it was. Also pregnant women, babies, and those with an immune compromised condition, especially people going through chemotherapy, something like that. So it's important to know that we can prevent this, and in our homes especially. And that's what we're going to talk mostly about today. Because the holidays are approaching and we're, cooking for families and maybe cooking a bigger meal with a lot more complication than we do on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So the most common cause of foodborne illness is raw or undercooked poultry.
That's what we make here in the US of A on
on Thanksgiving. And there's other things that you can also get sick from. And that's important to point out. It's not just poultry. There's issues with all kinds of meats, cheeses. There's issues with grains. I was at a potluck once and people said, well, there's no meat in this food, so it can't give you food poisoning. And I'm like, oops, because there are some serious types of foodborne illness that you get from grains, from rice, cooked rice, pasta, and potatoes.
That's just been left out for too many hours.
Yeah, mostly it's out around temperature control. That's right.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking a lot about meat too.
Yeah.
So where are most people affected? Well, most people are affected in restaurants. I hate to say it. Which, you go into a restaurant, you don't have a lot of control. You sort of have to trust the universe that, you're not going to get sick from eating the food. And in most states, they have some pretty strict rules about food codes in restaurants. Mm-hmm. Some states have what's called a food handler's permit, which everybody who works in a restaurant has to take a test and follow food safety guidelines. But I'm here to say that if you do feel like you've gotten sick from eating in a restaurant, please call the health department and tell them. Because that's the only way that people get an education. Food inspectors are not there to close down a business or take people's livelihood away, but they are there to educate the public about how to handle food safely. So if you feel like you get sick in a restaurant, you should report it. Other institutions also, are places where people get sick. Only about 11, in this state anyway, only about 11% of people get sick from food they prepare in their own home. So
That's probably why I haven't had it much, because I almost always prepare my food in my own home.
right.
We might only go out to eat a couple times a month for special occasions.
Right. I don't go out much anymore either, but yeah. So we're going to talk about how to protect yourself, especially around the holidays.
Good.
So I had a talk with our local food safety inspector recently, and he said the thing about Thanksgiving is that a lot of people don't realize it's the person handling the bird that gets sick sometimes.
Oh, why is that?
Well, that's all about cross-contamination. So you take a bird that's not cooked, it's raw. So what do you do with it? First thing, sometimes people think they have to rinse it off, right? So
that was what people used to do back in the old days. I know that.
Yes, and a lot of cookbooks they talk about that.
I researched that and knew not to do it. That might be also partly why I don't get food.
Right. I mean, think about it. It's like, okay, in a commercial kitchen, there is separate sinks for everything. A really good commercial kitchen will have a hand washing sink, a dishwashing sink, a sink to deal with produce, so that you're washing your produce in a different sink, and a special place to do meats.
Okay.
So in a commercial establishment, yeah, you could probably rinse off a turkey, but in my kitchen, I only have one sink, and it's not just like, say you rinsed off the turkey and then you bleached your sink. It kind of splatters too. So you're dealing with cross-contamination.
Yeah.
And cross-contamination is one of the first steps in preventing foodborne illness. So basically, there's different ways that it happens. One of the worst ways is like if you store meat in a refrigerator and it drips on other food.
Oh.
Or
raw meat.
Raw meat, yes.
Yeah.
That could even be, maybe it didn't drip on your food, maybe it just dripped on the refrigerator. I mean, that could be a mess too, because then you put other things in there and they get contaminated. Not washing your hands after handling meat, using the same cutting boards for meat and other foods like ready-to-eat foods or bread or whatever. It's a good idea to maybe have 2 separate cutting boards if you do prepare a lot of meat. There's a lot of debate about cutting boards. Some people said you should only use plastic. Some people say you should only use wood. I'm in the camp where you should probably use wood. And here's the reason why. It's because wood has a tendency to give up things because it's porous, whereas a lot of plastic has a tendency to kind of hang on to stuff.
Okay.
So the recommendations have been more to lean toward using wood.
And then must we use bleach on the cutting board, or
just a really good scrubbing, hot water and soap usually does it okay. If you have a plastic one and you like using it, you can put it in the dishwasher. That's probably the most effective way to clean them good.
Okay.
It's always been an interesting debate. How do you protect yourself from that? You watch out, wash your hands properly when you're dealing with food. Cross-contamination can happen in a lot of different ways. Anytime you handle a food that's been affected in any way and you don't know it, you could be possibly passing that bacteria on.
Yeah.
I used to teach canning classes. People know about botulism, which happens from home canned foods that are not done properly. So say a food gets contaminated, people go, well, I'll just throw it away. Well, you got to be really careful how you dispose of it because of cross-contamination.
Yeah. And what do you think about gloves? Like, I've tried gloves, but then I realized, well, wait a second. I have to keep changing the gloves, and I need to wash my hands in between because I've touched the gloves and then my hands are wet and I can't get the next fresh pair on, so I've given up trying to use gloves.
I think most people in their homes,
wash
hands. Most people in their homes don't use gloves. maybe if you're serving a large group of people and you've got dedicated areas, like maybe somebody's doing just the bread and the raw fruits and vegetables. But if you're handling different types of food, it gets complicated.
It's so complicated.
Yeah. In a food safety setting like a restaurant, gloves are definitely called for, but not necessarily in the home on a regular basis. Practice good hygiene. This is kind of the next step that we're going to talk about is, obviously hand washing. Hand washing really matters. It doesn't just matter when it comes to food safety. It matters in terms of illness too, just spreading illnesses. I think we all became super aware of that during COVID. Never prepare food for others if you're ill, obviously, and then using gloves for ready-to-eat foods in some settings. Yeah. I think that the worst thing for me in a restaurant is when I remember going into a restaurant one day to get something to eat, and somebody working there said, they made me come to work because I was really sick, but I'm really sick and I don't want to work today. I just kind of backed out and left,
Right.
Yeah. So then, just keeping your hands clean, washing them. And, everybody knows there's a 20-second rule, hot soap and water. And I even think sometimes it's not a bad idea to have paper towels, for hand washing in some situations, because the other thing can cause cross contamination is wiping cloths.
Right.
Yeah. Like cleaning up a spill from a chicken when you open it.
Right.
And if you use something and like a sponge that you're using for other things to wipe off other counters, it's better off to use paper towels. Yeah.
When it comes to preventing contamination.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not for everything, but
not for everything. Yeah. So the other step for food safety is to think about temperatures. And, it's a really important thing because there's such a thing called the danger zone. You want to keep food out of the danger zone, which is basically 41 degrees to 135. So think about your refrigerator. The refrigerator needs to be 40 degrees or below, right? I mean, you don't want your refrigerator to be warmer than 41 degrees because then it won't keep foods fresh.
Okay.
And it's important to keep foods out of that zone. So you want to cook food to the right temperature, and you want to hold food at the right temperature. So some of the things that happen that impact temperature control are undercooking. Obviously, if you're not cooking poultry to the right temperature, or cooking ground beef to the right temperature, slow reheating. You don't want to heat things up too slowly.
Yeah, I think I've heard that certain recipes where they have you slow cook, say, a meat for 12 hours at like 200 some degrees, that's dangerous.
Well, it depends on the cut of meat sometimes too.
Okay.
I
wouldn't know how to do it.
Yeah,
I just don't.
As kind of an aside here, we could talk about temperatures of what you should cook things to. For instance, poultry you should cook to 165. Ground beef is now 158. It used to be 155. Fish, pork, eggs is 145, and vegetables for hot holding is around 140. So it's important to keep in mind those temperatures. I have, here's my little food thermometer.
Yeah, I have one too. I wouldn't know otherwise.
Yeah, there's some pretty cool food thermometers out there now that have a little probe that can actually go into the oven when you're cooking and has a little digital readout. They're pretty fancy, and some of them get old and don't work that well, so you might want to replace them when you need to. But I think it's interesting that, we had a big E. coli outbreak back in the 1990s. I even had a friend whose daughter was impacted by that. And
wow.
It was pretty serious. But one of the things that came out of it was a much more attention paid to temperature control, which has really been good for consumers when it comes to meat, because now there are practices in place at fast food restaurants and institutions that really keep in mind the temperature, especially of ground meats. Animals are Well, they're dirty. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
You know, we have to protect ourselves.
Cold foods. I don't know if you're ready to talk about cold foods, but
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think of when you say E. coli, I think of fruits and vegetables from
Yeah,
the
unfortunately,
water.
unfortunately, we've had some pretty bad outbreaks of E. coli and Listeria in fresh produce. There was an incident where greens in a bag were shipped across the country, and I believe that was either E. coli or Listeria. I'm not sure. I'm not really going to go into all the different types of bacteria.
Right.
There was a bad incident with cantaloupe just because it was stored in a metal bin that was wet. Cold foods, it's important to keep them cold. And they're supposed to be cold under 41 degrees. And also to keep them, we have something that's called the 2-2-2 rule, basically. And I think it's
a question. When you mentioned the cantaloupe, are you talking about pre-prepared cantaloupe that's cut up?
No. What happened was the cantaloupe.
Why would a piece of fresh fruit
Well, that's a very good question.
At room temperature? Like,
okay,
I wouldn't
melons are especially a problem because they grow on the ground, right? A melon grows on the ground, and people eat them. They don't cook them. Obviously, you don't cook a melon,
right?
So it can be dirty. And so it's really important. In fact, there's some pretty strict rules in food service establishments about cutting melons and keeping them at at a certain temperature. And because cantaloupe is especially a problem because the skin of the cantaloupe is so convoluted. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not smooth, so it's harder to clean.
Well, what I do is I wash my melons of every variety really well in soap and water.
With a little brush or something?
Yeah, when I bring them home. With
that's a good idea.
Brush. Yeah. But then I don't put the whole melon in the refrigerator. I wait till I cut it up. It might be that
right. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. But once it's cut, you know, you know, if you think about it, the bacteria gets into the food when it's sliced if the melon skin is not clean.
Right.
So it's happened with strawberries. It's a problem. I mean, because unfortunately, we live in a world where food is produced in pretty large quantities in some places.
In a lot of places.
A lot of places. So, you know, it'd be nice and wonderful if we could all shop local and buy from our local farmers, but that just isn't the case because in some parts of our country, it just isn't available. So if you have to buy things in a bag, like greens, you can cook them. Obviously, if it's spinach or kale or something like that, obviously you're not going to cook salad greens. I personally have kind of a prejudice against greens in a bag. So what I would recommend that people do is take them out of that bag and wash them and then let them dry and put them in maybe wrap them in a paper towel and put them back in the fridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
we live on the west coast of the U.S., so we can be a little snootier about this,
right?
Than people in the heartland or back east or someplace where you can only grow your own veggies for a couple months out of the year.
Well, and where I live, lettuce gets pretty funky in the stores around this time of year.
Yeah.
So a lot of people buy lettuce in a plastic box. I have to say, I'm usually never happy with it because by the time you get through with the box, it's all scummy on the bottom. So it's an issue. Yeah, for sure.
I just don't eat fresh greens at certain times of the year. I try and go with the seasonal. So I might more likely in the winter have a kale salad than a lettuce salad.
Sure. Or a cabbage salad. I like cabbage salads.
I love cabbage salad. I make cabbage salad at this time of year, and that's a good alternative. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are vulnerable foods for temperature control, and that pretty much includes all the seafoods, meats, eggs, poultry, dairy, and soft cheeses. But it also includes cooked rice, pasta, and potatoes. I just want to bring that up because it is an issue. You know, people always talk about the potato salad, you know, that they got sick from at the big wedding party they went to or whatever. It's actually not from the mayonnaise. It's from the potatoes.
Really?
Believe it or not. Yeah, usually. Yeah. Mayonnaise actually is pretty stable product. People worry about mayonnaise. The problem is with mayonnaise is if you did leave it out at room temperature, it would separate and it wouldn't be very attractive. So most of the time it needs to be in the refrigerator.
Okay.
So let's talk about cooling foods.
Okay.
This is one thing that I think people make a big mistake about, and that is that when you have a warm food, and it used to be that you always left food out until it got cool, right? And then you put it in the refrigerator. Now, I think that originated from the old-fashioned refrigerators where people had like the ice box. And so if you put something hot in the ice box, it would start to melt. I used to have a refrigerator like that. And, so really you should cool things in a shallow pan, when you're going to put them in the refrigerator. Don't put them in something that's too deep, because that deep pot, sometimes, like, you take a pot of soup, maybe a gallon or something, or maybe even a half gallon. The interior of that maybe never gets cool. So it's really a good idea to put things in shallow pans. If you have to put a pot somewhere to get cool and you have a big enough refrigerator, I don't have a big enough refrigerator for that myself, but if you did, you can put it in some ice, and do an ice bath and cool it that way.
And then the other thing I do is I don't put a top on it until it's completely cool in the fridge.
Sure.
Then I add the top, because once you put the top on, that's holding in the heat.
Sure.
Longer.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I read it. There was a rule that I thought was interesting, the 2-2-2 rule.
What's
Basically,
that?
it's like if you're going to have a meal and you have leftovers sitting around, keep them out for about 2 hours, and then put them in the refrigerator for, leftovers for about 2 days, or put them in the freezer for about 2 months. Now, frozen foods can stay longer than 2 months. Some things, I'm not going to go into every single food and how long it can stay frozen, but most foods in the freezer, if they stay too long, it's going to affect their quality, not so much their safety. It's going to dry out, get freezer burn, not be as tasty. So, it's a good idea to pay attention to, fish, maybe 6 months, raw fish. Leftovers, maybe 2 months. If you do it longer than that, you're going to end up not really wanting to eat it.
Yeah.
Not going to be that great.
So are you saying, when you say keep them out 2 hours, you're saying you may keep them out up to 2 hours. You don't have to. I mean, if somebody wants to put them in the fridge right away, more the better, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't put things in the fridge when they're super hot,
right?
But once they start to cool down, yeah, it's fine to put them in right away. But don't leave them out too long.
Yeah.
Is the trick.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as consumers, we have a lot of things that we can help to protect ourselves as well, right? We can look at dates. I get so mad at myself if I go to the store and I buy milk and the date is in 2 days that it's used by, it's like, darn. Pay attention to those dates. Certain things are more vulnerable than others, like milk. Milk past the date usually gets funky, right? The other thing you can do is look for recalls. You can usually go to your Department of Health in your state and see recalls. They usually are on social media or in the newspaper. There's quite a few. It's kind of surprising. Most of them are processed foods. There was a local dairy here, though, had some soft cheese that had to be recalled for listeria. So there are things that pop up. So always watch out for recalls.
And often it might be a fruit or vegetable that comes prepackaged.
Yes.
In a plastic
I even
container.
saw some frozen fruit last year that had been recalled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Some frozen mixed berries or something. Yeah. Sometimes it's for something mechanical. Like there's such a thing as mechanical food poisoning, which is basically a staple or something, a foreign object in the food. I did want to talk a little bit about eggs real quick. Eggs are sometimes recalled. Recently, we've had a lot of stuff in the media about eggs. So pay attention to that too. That if it's been recalled, look at
I'm
the lot
sorry to
number.
laugh. I thought, I can't help but think of the price of eggs.
Oh, well, the price of eggs too. Although I've noticed they're coming down a little bit in my community, but yeah, the price of eggs is something else again.
Yeah.
And, they tried to tie that to the bird flu, but I don't know if that's reality or not. I mean, who knows what's really going on with that. But just try to protect yourself, when you go to the store. Look around, look at dates, and see what's out there and how you can get the best food for your tummies.
Yeah. And I really think that for those of us who do mostly cook at home, who understand food safety and use these tips that Susy's given us, we can all be pretty safely assured that we're going to have a great Thanksgiving and
Yes.
good in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, enjoy it. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
And eat hearty and enjoy it.
I think that's a good place to stop. What do you think, Susy?
Yes, I think so. Thank you for listening.
That's really great. Thank you so much for keeping us safe through the holidays. I appreciate you so much.
And one more thing, Margaret, if you have any questions, don't feel free to ask them on our website.
Oh yeah, Susie and I are doing a blog now on that. Yeah. So until next time,
we are staying alive.
You've been listening to Staying Alive with Margaret and Susie. This show is hosted by Margaret Cooley and Susy Hymas. To subscribe to our show, leave a comment or ask a question, please visit stayingalivewithmargaretandsusie.com. Our podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. If you've enjoyed our program, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.